So let's get started. So good evening everyone. I am Simran, your PMRF teaching assistant, and I am taking this course of medicinal chemistry, which is an NPTEL platform course running on NPTEL platform, and the course instructor is Professor Harinath Chakrapani from ISER Pune. So this is the course which we have taken till week 6, and now this is the week 7 of this lecture, this tutorial. I hope you all have already gone through all the tutorials which are already uploaded on the YouTube channel, and the link is provided to you as well. I hope my screen is visible and I am audible to all of you. So before starting, this is a problem solving session which is on every Saturday we meet on from 5 to 7. As I was not able to take last Saturday's lecture, so that's why I'm taking this class today as a compensatory class. So tomorrow as well we have the 5 to 7 lecture of week 8. So today is week 7 which we are considering. So this is a platform is Google Meet, which will be the link which is shared with all of you. And in case of any network disruption, please wait and do not leave the tutorial. And please ask your queries in the chat box or raise your hand, whichever you will feel comfortable with. Now the slides will be shared with the students soon on the link provided by NPTEL coordinator. And if you want to see the recording of previous sessions, you can go to my YouTube channel, that is Simran NPTEL TA. So this is a YouTube channel on which I have uploaded all the recordings of every week till sixth week. So six lectures are there, and the seventh one, which is today. So after the end, I will be uploading this recording in that particular YouTube channel only. So you can go through that also. And please make sure to attend every tutorial so that you can better understand the course, and you can actually questions about the thing which we have discussed in the previous lectures as well as the tutorial which is upcoming. So please make sure to attend every tutorial. So now coming to week 7 content. So these are the content which we have to cover in this tutorial session. So it is drug administration routes, finding a lead, drug screening, drug administration routes, and finding a lead basically. So tutorial will be based on these things. So now coming to the routes of drug administration. So how many routes are possible to take a drug? So it could be internal, it could be parenteral, it could be local application. Local application as you have applied on the skin directly. Parenteral is the injections or inhalation. So basically, inhalation means there are some uh, medicines which you inhale basically for the asthma peoples. They inhale the medicine from the inhaler, so that comes in the parenteral drug and administration. So the pathway is injections or inhalation. So through injection it could be intradermal, dermal means skin, so it could be to the skin, subcutaneous, intramuscular, into the muscles, intravenous, it could be in the veins as well, intra-arterial, intraethical, intramedullary, or intra-articular. So basically, medulla is the ear. In ear, you have that medulla. So in ear, sometimes they give you injection in the medulla. That is intramedullary. So these kind of things are there when you are talking about injection. Then it comes in the parenteral drug and administration. But when you are talking about the intermediate drug administration, just wait. Someone wants to join. So I was talking about the routes of drug administration. So there could be three routes, that is enteral, parenteral, or local application. So when you are talking about enteral, so it could be oral, sublingual, and enema. So these three pathways are there when you are taking the medicine orally, sublingually, or enema. So in these things, it is coming in the enteral drug administration. When you are talking about the parenteral, so it comes with the two things, that is first is injections, or the second one is the inhalation. So if you are inhaling some kind of medicine and it comes in the asthma category, so basically when someone is asthmatic, so they inhale the medicine from inhaler, and that comes into the inhalation. So this is the route of taking drug in the for the asthma peoples. And when you are talking about this injection, so it could be these kind of category which is coming into the injection, that is intradermal, subcutaneous, intramuscular, intravenous, intra-arterial, intraethical, intramedullary, or intra-articular. So basically, in the skin, in muscles, in veins, arteries, in medulla, in ear. Medulla is there in ear, so sometimes people give the injection in the medulla as well. So that thing is known as intramedullary. So that is known as intramedullary. So basically giving the injection in the medulla. When you are talking about this enteral, so it is the oral drug administration. Basically, you are taking orally, or sublingual is the placing tablets or films or sprays under the tongue to dissolve it. So basically, it is going directly into the bloodstream through mucous membrane. So basically, you are taking the uh, drug under the tongue to dissolve it rapidly. So this is known as the sublingual drug administration. I hope I am audible to everyone. And when you are talking about this enema route, so this enema route is a rectal route of drug administration where liquid medication or fluid is inserted into the rectum or lower colon. So basically, when you are taking the drug into the rectal route, this is known as enema. So this is how the drug administration routes are divided. So now coming to drug absorption and distribution. So when you are taking this drug as an oral or rectal form, then it is going directly into the gut. So basically, it is then going to portal system and liver and bile. This is how it is going into your body and getting absorbed. So this is how it is, like oral or rectal is going into your gut and then it is eliminating from your body. Similarly, percutaneous, that is going into your skin and then into the plasma, and then it is going directly to your milk sweat is coming, and that is how it get eliminated. IV is directly going into the plasma without this, basically bypassing this first metabolism route. So intravenous drugs are going directly into the plasma membrane. Then this intramuscular drug, that is going into the muscle and then plasma, and then it is secreting out from your body. Intraretical is going into the central, basically central unit, and then it is going into the brain, bypassing this plasma and then excreting it from your body. Similarly, inhalating drugs like, as I have told you about the asthma drug, it is going into your lungs after inhalation and then to your bloodstream, and then it is going out from your body. So this is how this administration routes, different administration routes are basically going through different absorption and distribution in your body, and different pathways are operative, and then it is getting eliminated from your body in different forms. So this is how it is looking like. So basically, drug absorption is dependent on how you are taking it, how the administration is there. So depending on the drug administration, drug taking, it depends how it is going to be absorbed in your body and how it is now going to be eliminated from your body. So if you see here, the solid dosage form when you are taking it, it's getting if it is dissolution, basically drug in the solution, then it is going as unbound unionized drug into your body, and then it is going into your lipid. Basically, lipid is forming through the unbound unionized drug. So it is lipophilic in nature, that unionized drug. So when you are taking it, it is getting disintegrated. Then the granules are forming, and deaggregation is basically giving you the fine particles. So this is how the drugs are getting metabolized in your body. So if you are taking it in the solution, then it is going as an unionized drug, and then because of the lipophilic nature of that unionized drug, it is directly surpassing your cell membrane. So basically, we have already discussed about the cell membrane, bilayer membrane. So how it is constructed, how the polar head groups are outside the cell membrane, and inside it is lipophilic in nature. So this is how we have already discussed in the previous lectures. So unionized drugs and ionized drug, two kind of things are there. So if it is unionized, then it is basically lipophilic and is passing through the bilayer membrane. So these drug administration routes. So basically, otic route, that is topical, intracochlear, intratympanic. Basically, it is giving into that medulla that I was talking about previously. So intramedullary drugs are there, which is given through your ear directly into the medulla. It is giving. When you are talking about this nasal, so you have heard about this nasal drops and nasal sprays. So this is how you are taking the drug through your nasal passage. So there it is going into your bloodstream through the nasal pathway. When you are talking about this rectum and vaginal, this is basically the it could be a gel, a tablet, or ointment, anything which is you are placing into your rectal or vaginal pathway, and then it is getting absorbed in your skin and going to your plasma membrane, and then it is acting onto your body. So when you're talking about injections, so basically it could be intravenous, intramuscular, subcutaneous, intraarterial, intraarticular. So basically it could be in veins, muscles, arteries. So this is how the injections are going to give you that particular drug administration technique. So it is directly invading into your body, and 100% of this intravenous drug is going into your bloodstream. So basically, the bioavailability, which we have already talked about in the previous lecture. So this bioavailability, basically, the availability of the drug molecule into your body without getting metabolized through your body is 100% in the case of intravenous injections, because it is directly given to your veins. So it is directly entering into your bloodstream without surpassing your first metabolism thing. So this first metabolism also we have discussed in the previous lecture. So if anyone doesn't know it, please refer to that particular lecture to get a better understanding of that topic. Then comes to ocular. Ocular means you are taking the drops, eye drops you are taking. So basically, it is directly going into your eyes. So it could be a drop, it could be ointment, implants, insert, or contact lens. So this is how the ocular thing works. So it could be in the ear, sorry, in the eyes. So when it comes to the oral, so this is the most common thing which we have taken, the route which we have used very commonly for the drug administration, because we are taking tablets, capsules, thin films, syrup, solutions. So we are taking it orally through our mouth, and this is how they are going into your bloodstream. So basically, it doesn't surpass the first metabolism. It is actually getting metabolized in your body, and the bioavailability of these kind of drugs is not 100%. It is actually uh, reduced to 50 or 70%, because what happens here when you are taking a tablet orally, so it is going to your body, and then what happens, unless it is reaching to your active site where it has to show the action. So basically, before going to that receptor, it is actually getting metabolized in your body. So it is getting absorbed in your body. So some amount of quantity is actually uh, going to be metabolized, absorbed in your body, and doesn't actually 100% goes to the receptor of interest and the active site of interest, in which it has to go and show some activity in your body, right? So the purpose for which you are taking it, it is not going to be 100% going to that particular receptor. Some amount of that particular oral tablet, capsules, or syrups are basically getting metabolized in your body. So it is not available fully 100% for the receptor molecule to get the enzymatic action or other thing which we are taking, because of which we are taking it. So the bioavailability of these kind of things are lower, but when you are talking about intravenous, it is 100%. So now coming to an inhalation. Inhalation is again, we are talking about that asthmatic persons. So basically they are taking this dry powders, liquid spray, aerosols. So sometimes steams are also taken by these people. So this is how they have taken the drug in the steam flow, so that they could get into your body and shows action. So through inhalation also, drug is going to be administered in your body. Topical and transdermal, as the name suggests, it is the ointment which we actually apply on our skin. So that is the topical and transdermal. So directly you are applying some ointment or gel or patches, creams, microneedles directly on your skin. So that comes in transdermal administration. So basically, directly you are applying onto your scratch, scar. You are applying directly the ointment or gel to get it treated. This is actually going into your skin through that pathway. So these are the main drug and administration routes which one can apply and take drug into your body. So this is the most common, and this is the variety of drug administration route. Okay, possibly basically. So this absorption of drug. So drug absorption is defined as a process of movement of unchanged drug from the site of administration to systemic circulation. So basically, when you are taking a drug and without changing, without the change in its property, in its structure, it is getting to the site, that is systemic circulation. So basically, unchanged drug from the site of administration. Site of administration means either you have taken it orally, either you have taken it, inhaled it, either you are taking injections or anything. The amount, basically the process of movement of unchanged drug. Unchanged means without changing the physical and biological property of that drug, it is going to your systemic circulation. Okay, so this is known as the absorption of the drug. So again, as you can see here, this is the intranasal spray. This is the sublingual tablet which you have taken uh, under your tongue. This is transdermal patch. Basically, you are taking through the skin. Intramuscular injection. Where is the placement of that particular thing? This is the muscle, and in the muscle you are taking an injection. Intravenous in veins you are taking. First pass metabolism in lungs, minor extent. So basically, first pass mechanism is operative in case of the sublingual tablet, intranasal sprays, but actually it passes when you are talking about this intravenous injection. This first pass metabolism is actually doesn't operate. So here it is happening in minor extent in the liver. It is happening in the major extent in the minor extent in the lungs. It is happening in majorly in the liver. The first pass metabolism. So this is how you have taken a medicine, and it's going like this, and then it is it is metabolized in your liver, and then it is going forward into your intestine, and then it is excreting out from your body. So this is how it works. So basically, when you are talking about these injections, it is actually surpassing that route, and it is directly going into your bloodstream and then excreting out from your body. So I hope it is clear to all of you how are the routes operative for the drug administration, and every route you have understood well. So these are the routes. So according to now these concepts, we are seeing some of the questions in this tutorial. So question number one is, drug A is 98% bound to plasma protein. Drug B, which competes with drug A for its plasma protein binding site, is administered. 1% of drug A is displaced by the protein of this drug B, and as a consequence, the free unbound concentration of drug A increases by. So basically, there is a drug A which is 98% bounded already to that plasma protein, but drug B is also there which is competing for that plasma protein with drug A, and this 1% of drug A is actually displaced from the protein by drug B. As a consequence, you have to tell the free unbound concentration of drug A. Is it 1%, 5%, 10%, or 50%? Anyone? So think about it. Read the question twice, and then we'll answer it. Okay. So let's see the answer. So you have given that drug A is 98% bound to plasma membrane, which means the free unbound drug is 2%, right? But now the drug B is also displacing 1% of drug from plasma protein. If it is displacing 1% protein, then now the initial free drug concentration was 2. Initially, free drug concentration was 2, but now the free drug concentration is increasing because of the drug B, and that is by 1 unit, 1%. So now the free drug is 3 units, right? So initial free drug concentration, let the total concentration will be 100%. If 98% of A is bounded, that means 2% is free, right? This much is clear, 2 units. Now what is the effect of drug B? Now drug B is actually replacing your 1% of drug A. So if it is replacing 1% of drug A, that means it is 1 unit which is getting displaced by drug B, right? So both of them joins together, and now you have a unit that is this one unit is joining together, and now it is making 3 units of the free concentration of drug A, right? So now the increase in the free drug would be new free drug minus old free drug divided by old free drug into 100. So this is the formula of finding out the increase in the free drug concentration. So new free drug was 3 units because now it is displaced by 1 unit by drug B, which actually combines with this 2 unit to get it 3. Now the old free drug was 2 unit initially and divided by 2 into 100, so it needs 50%. Sorry. So the free concentration of drug A is increasing by 50% based on the data which they have given. Okay, so just think about it again how it is giving you 50%. So I'm just repeating it. So what was the question? So drug A was 98% bound to the plasma protein. Drug B, which actually is competing with drug A for its plasma protein. So 1% of drug A in the competition with drug B, they have the drug A lost 1%, right? So if it is losing 1%, that means now the free drug concentration is increasing by 1 unit, right? So if I am taking this drug A is 98% bound, that is given, which means 2% is free. After the displacement by drug B of drug A, 1% is now free again. So 1 and 2 means 3 units are free. 3% of the drug A is free. So now coming to this formula, so there is new free drug that is 3 now. Old that initially it was 2% only, that is 3 unbound. So this is how they have divided it by 2 and into 100 is getting 50%. So basically 50% of the free concentration of drug is increases. So I hope it is clear to everyone. If it is not, please let me know. Okay, so if it's clear, then I'm moving forward. So there comes a term that is bioavailability. So I'm again explaining this term. So this bioavailability refers to the extent and rate at which the active moiety, that is drug or metabolite, enter the systemic circulation, thereby accessing the site of action. So as the name suggests, bioavailability, that means the fraction of a drug which is actually absorbed into systemic circulation. What do you mean by that now? Now the drug, as I have already told you that if you are taking the oral medicine, the bioavailability is not 100%. That means your 100% drug is not going to the active site of action basically. It is getting metabolized some in liver, in intestines, or somehow it is getting metabolized or absorbed by your body. So the absorption or metabolism of that particular drug is actually decreasing the amount of drug you have already taken. So if you have taken 20 mg of drug molecule and 5% of that molecule is actually absorbing or metabolized in your body after taking it. So that means only 15% is going to your the site of action rather than 20% of administration, right? If you have taken 20, but it is not 20 which is going to the site of action. It is only 15% which is actually available for the next sequence of action, right? So this 5% is actually getting degraded by your body. So now the bioavailability, which was which was 100%, as you have taken 100% of that medicine. So if the 5 mg is now decreasing, so now the bioavailability, the amount of drug which is absorbed by systemic circulation is not 20 mg, it is now 15 mg, right? So it actually decreases your bioavailability of that particular drug into the site of action. So now at the site of action, it is not available 100%, it is actually lesser than what you have taken initially. So this is known as bioavailability. So it is a fraction absorbed into the systemic circulation if you have taken any IV. So now this IV, it means that intravenous injection. So this intravenous injection, the bioavailability is 100%. See, 100% it is achieving and then it is going down. It is getting metabolized with time. But initially it has 100% of 100% of bioavailability, basically plasma concentration of drug. So in plasma membrane, your drug concentration is 100% because you have taken it directly into your veins. That means it is getting it directly into your plasma membrane or bloodstream, right? That is why intravenous injections have 100% bioavailability. But if you are taking a oral tablet, so see, this is the this line is corresponding to that oral tablet. So with time, it actually increases the concentration because as you have taken it, it gradually increases the concentration in your plasma membrane. But then it rapidly decreases. Why? Because it is getting metabolized, it is getting degraded by your body. So it is never 100% because it is some of the amount is already getting absorbed while passing through your body and reaching to that particular site of action. So this is known as bioavailability, right? I hope it is clear to all of you what is bioavailability. Moving forward, so the next question is ibuprofen is a weak acid in the stomach will be present in which of the following form? So ibuprofen is the structure of this ibuprofen is this. Now it is a weak acid. It is saying that if it is present in your stomach, which form it will be present in? It is ionized form mostly, non-ionized form mostly, half ionized and half no ionized, or will form aggregate. Aggregate means it forms the aggregation of a number of molecules. So ibuprofen structure is given. It is a weak acid. So you have to identify in which of the following four forms it is present in your stomach. Just think about it. Any idea? Okay, so in the stomach, as we know that the pH is acidic, right? So your stomach pH is acidic. So that is why if it is acidic pH, what do you think will this molecule is behave in the acidic medium? Will it ionize? Will it non-ionize? Will it half ionized? Will it form a aggregate? Okay. So what happens here? As the stomach is acidic in nature, so basically the pH of stomach is acidic. So if it is acidic, as you know that this acid group can only form a ionized thing when the base is present because of this hydrogen is abstracted by a base, and this hydrogen atom after the abstraction is going to get you a negative charge which is actually stabilized by this conjugation of this acetate group, right? So if the medium is basic, it would form a O minus H plus preferentially because of the resonance which is stabilizing this negative charge, right? So basically what I'm saying is, so if the medium is basic, then basically there is a negative charge which is arising over here and a positive charge which is arising over here, right? So this is what is known as ionized form, right? So this is the ionized form for this acid group. So if the basic medium was there, then the base, basically this base can abstract your proton and then will leave you with this O minus, which is actually stabilized due to the conjugation, right? So there is a conjugation which is there. So due to this conjugation, this is stabilized. So if the medium was basic, it could have a ionized species form. Okay, but now we have a medium that is acidic enough. So in stomach the pH is acidic. So if it is acidic, so what happens? Now acid will not form a ionized species, rather it will actually exist as a non-ionized form mostly, because in acidic medium this O minus charge is not going to be formed, right? And this oxygen is also getting protonated. So there is no acidic charge which is going to be formed, negative charge in the acidic medium. That is why it is not going to be existing as a ionized species. It is existing as a non-ionized form, right? So if the medium was basic, the first one was the correct one, that it could be present in a ionized form mostly. But due to the acidic nature of the stomach, it is not possible to have that ionized form in acidic medium. Okay, so in acidic medium, it would be non-ionized form only which is present of ibuprofen. So I hope it is clear to everyone. Coming to the next question. So which route of drug administration provides the fastest systemic drug effect? Oral, intravenous, intramuscular, subcutaneous. So they are asking which route of drug administration, which route after taking a drug is providing the fastest systemic drug effect. Basically, your uh, drug molecule is going to your active site, basically site of action, in which route is fastest. Is it oral? Is it intravenous? Is it intramuscular? Is it subcutaneous? Which route will you think will provide the fastest systemic drug effect? Any answers? Okay, so the right answer is intravenous, as I have told you that intravenous administration delivers the drug directly into the bloodstream, bypassing absorption barrier such as membranes or tissues. Therefore, the drug shows immediate onset of action and 100% bioavailability. So, intravenous administration is the fastest drug administration route that actually goes fastest to your systemic drug. That is directly actually going to your bloodstream, that is bypassing your first pass metabolism, and that is why it shows an immediate effect. It shows immediate effect, as you can see, and that is why it has a 100% bioavailability. Okay, so the right answer is intravenous injections. I hope it is clear to everyone. Moving forward, the most common mechanism of drug absorption across biological membrane is active transport, passive diffusion, endocytosis, ion pairing. So the most common mechanism of drug absorption across the biological membrane. So this active, passive transport, endocytosis, we have actually read about it in the last tutorial. So whoever is new who doesn't know about these things, please refer to the last tutorial. I don't have that slide right now, but in the last tutorial we have discussed these things in detail. So this active transport, passive transport, and endocytosis, which of the mechanism is actually very common in the drug absorption across the biological membrane? Just a second. Okay, so the most common mechanism of drug absorption across the biological membrane is active transport, passive diffusion, endocytosis, or ion pairing. So, what do you think will be the right answer? As we have already discussed about these three things. So, the correct answer is passive diffusion. So, most drugs actually cross the cell membranes by passive diffusion because membrane consists of lipid bilayers, right? And drugs that are lipophilic and non-ionized diffused more easily through the membrane. So drugs that are actually lipophilic in nature and non-ionized drugs are also lipophilic in nature. So that actually easily cross these membrane, and that is why these drugs mostly cross your cell membrane through the passive diffusion. Okay, so I hope it is clear to all of you. Coming to the next question. Weakly acidic drugs are best absorbed in which environment? Basic environment, neutral environment, acidic environment, highly alkaline environment. So they are talking about the weakly acidic drugs. In which environment it will be best absorbed by your body? Any guesses? Let's think about it. Okay, so the right answer is acidic environment. So basically, we have seen the ibuprofen. That is also a weak drug, and in stomach, it is actually getting absorbed better because of the acidic pH of the stomach, right? So the weakly acidic drugs are actually best absorbed in uh, acidic environment. So weak acids basically remain non-ionized in acidic conditions, right? So because of the acidity, they will be ionized in the basic condition. The non-ionized form is more lipophilic, allowing it to pass biological membrane easily, and therefore weak acids are better absorbed in the stomach due to the acidic pH. Right? So we have taken this similar question in the last slide, which is about ibuprofen. So ibuprofen being a weak acid, it is actually getting absorbed in stomach better because it is acidic pH which is present in the stomach, and weak acids are basically non-ionized species, and this non-ionized species is behaving as a lipophilic group, and this lipophilic group, as we have already discussed about the bilayer lipid bilayer of the cell membrane. So that is actually constructed of the polar head groups and lipophilic uh, fatty acid chains. So because of the interior of the cell membrane is lipophilic, if you have a lipophilic drug, it actually passes through your cell membrane very easily because of the lipophilic nature of the fatty acid chains, which is inside your facing inside your cell membrane, and due to the lipophilic nature of weak acids, it crosses our cell membrane easily, and that is how it is getting absorbed by your stomach very easily because of the acidic pH. So, weak drugs is better absorbed in acidic environment. Okay, so I hope it is clear to all of you. Going forward, most orally administered drugs are absorbed primarily in the stomach, small intestine, large intestine, or liver. So, when you are taking a tablet orally, so what do you think this tablet is going to get absorbed primarily in which of the part of your body? Is it stomach, small intestine, large intestine, or liver? Any guesses? So the right answer is small intestine. See, the small intestine has very large surface area due to villi and microvilli which is present on the small intestine, right? Which is actually making it a major site of drug absorption despite the stomach having lower pH. See, drugs are getting absorbed in stomach, right? Weak drugs are getting absorbed very easily there because of the lower pH. But small intestines, because it has a large surface area, which is because of the presence of villi and microvilli, that is actually providing surface for the absorption of the drugs. So it is a major site of drug absorption, that is the small intestine. Okay, so most of your orally administered drugs are absorbed in small intestine. So I hope it is clear to all of you. Moving forward, so according to the pH partition hypothesis, which form of a drug is more readily absorbed across membranes? So based on the similar concept of pH, so they are asking which form of drug is actually readily absorbed across the cell membrane. Is it the ionized form? Is it the non-ionized form? Is it the salt form? Wait, it's requested to all of you, please join on time. Okay, so I was explaining, according to the pH partition hypothesis, which form of drug is more readily absorbed across the cell membrane. So, which drug you think will be passing very fast through your cell membrane? Is it the ionized form? Is it the non-ionized form, salt form, or hydrogen form? Which one will you think will be passing the cell membrane fastest? So, we have taken these 8 questions, and based on that, you can answer it. So, any guesses? Okay, so the correct answer is non-ionized form, as I have already explained previously. That non-ionized form of a drug is actually lipophilic in nature, right? So, which actually makes it very uh, fast to move through the lipid membrane and diffuse across it. Ionized drugs are more water soluble and cross membranes less efficiently. So, based on the structure of the lipid bilayer cell membrane, as the polar groups are pointing out and the fatty acid chains are pointing inside of the cell membrane, so the lipophilic molecules are actually very rapid in passing the cell membrane because of the lipophilicity of the fatty acid chain and lipophilic nature of the non-ionized drug. So non-ionized drug pass very efficiently through the cell membrane, but if you have the ionized drug, which is actually more soluble in water and is preferred by the polar head groups which are present on the cell membrane, so it should cross the cell membrane less efficiently than the non-ionized drug. So if you have a non-ionized drug, it could pass your cell membrane very quickly. So I hope it is clear to all of you why these non-ionized forms are better behaved while talking about the crossing of cell membranes. Going to the another question. So now, which of the following statement is false regarding the blood-brain barrier? So there is a term known as blood-brain barrier, and you have to answer which of the following statement is false about it. So the walls of a capillary supplying the brain have tight fitting cell, making it difficult for polar drug to leave the capillaries. The capillaries in the brain have a fatty coating, making it more difficult for drugs to enter the brain. The walls of capillaries supplying the brain are made up of several layers of cells which act as a barrier to release the drug. Hydrophobic drug pass through the blood-brain barrier more easily than the hydrophilic drug. So basically, before knowing about the false thing, first of all, you need to know what is blood-brain barrier, right? So this is the blood-brain barrier (BBB). So it is a physical barrier that prevents any random solutes in the circulating blood from entering the brain. So it is a barrier which actually prevent any random solute to enter into your brain. It restricts pathogens, harmful metabolites, and large hydrophilic molecules from entering the brain. It allows the diffusion of oxygen, carbon dioxide, hormones, and small molecular molecules, but doesn't allow the passage of these harmful metabolites or pathogens. Cells of barrier actively transport metabolic products such as glucose across the barrier using specific transport proteins known as transporters. It restricts the passage of peripheral immune factors like signaling molecule, antibodies, immune cells like cytokines, thereby protecting our brain from harmful immune activities. So basically, it is protecting your brain from harmful metabolites and pathogens and large hydrophilic molecules. Tight junctions made up of occludin and clodin and jam junction associated molecule which don't allow even a small molecule to enter. This is the tight junction. So this is the picture of blood-brain barrier. So what is there? This microglia is there. Basement membrane which is there here. This is the endothelial cell present inside the cell. Tight junction that is here. So it is this tight junction is made up of this occludin and chlorine and junction associated molecule which actually doesn't allow any of the small molecule to enter your brain. So brain barrier is the endothelial barrier whereas blood CSF barrier is epithelial barrier. So it is the endothelial means the cells are present inside the molecules. Basically inside the cell this is the blood-brain barrier which is present. But when you are talking about the central system, it is the epithelial barrier. So the difference being where the tight junction is located. So this is the position of the tight junction at the cell membrane. This is the endothelial cell. Endothelial barrier is there. So this is the barrier which is known as blood-brain barrier, which is endothelial in nature, right? So this is actually preventing the passage of uh, restrict pathogens, harmful metabolites, and large hydrophilic molecules to enter your brain. So this is a physical barrier actually that prevents any harmful thing to enter your brain. Okay. If there is any metabolite which is harmful present in your blood, it actually stops that particular thing, that particular metabolite to pass through your brain. So this is known as blood-brain barrier. So now coming to the question again. So which of the following statement is false? So the walls of capillaries lining the brain have tight fitting cells, making it difficult for polar drop to leave the capillary. The capillaries in the brain have a fatty coating, making it more difficult for drugs to enter the brain. The walls of capillaries supplying the brain are made up of several layers, which act as a barrier to release of the drug. Hydrophobic drugs pass through the blood barrier, but more easily than the hydrophilic drugs. So, which is the false statement? So, basically, this hydrophobic drug is passing through the blood barrier easily. Yes, it is passing it because, as you can see here, it is actually stopping your. Where is that down? Hmm. So it is not allowing your hydrophilic molecules to enter the brain. So large hydrophilic molecules are not allowed. So this statement is correct, right? Walls of capillary supplying the brain have tight fitting cells, making it difficult for polar drug to leave the capillary. right? So these walls are actually made up of tight fitting cells, yes. So these are the tight junctions which are present, which makes it difficult for the polar drug, yes, because polar is also hydrophilic drugs, right? So those hydrophilic drugs, it is not letting you pass through the blood-brain barrier. So this is the correct statement. So now coming to this, the capillaries in the brain have a fatty coating, making it more difficult for drugs to enter the brain. Yes, it is having a fatty coating. That is why it is passing your small hydrophobic molecules, but doesn't allow your hydrophilic molecule to enter. So this term is also correct. When coming to the option three, the walls of the capillaries supplying the brain are made up of several layers of cells which act as a barrier to release the drug. So if drug is not going to be released by this barrier, then how it is going to action? Right. So this is the wrong answer. So basically, this is the false statement regarding the blood-brain barrier. So I hope it is clear what is a blood-brain barrier is. So it is a barrier that actually prevents your harmful chemicals, hydrophilic groups to enter your brain. I hope it is clear to all of you how it is acting. Okay, so if it is clear, then I am moving forward. Anyone has any doubt, please ask me. Okay, if not, I am moving forward. So, coming to the next question, this is again the pharmacokinetics, which we have actually discussed in week 3, I think. So, what are the basic process pathway involved in pharmacokinetics? Absorption, distribution, dissolution, or excretion? Second option, absorption, distribution, metabolism, or excretion. Absorption, concentration, dissolution, and excretion. Or absorption, concentration, metabolism, and excretion. So, what do you think are the basic process that actually involves in pharmacokinetics? It's a very straightforward question. Anyone knows about it? Think about it. We have actually discussed these things previously. So the correct answer is the second option. This is ADME process, basically this pharmacokinetic. What is meant by this thing? The movement and modification of medication inside your body. So if you are taking a medicine, so how it is moving and modifying in your body, that is known as pharmacokinetics. So pharmacokinetics involves absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion. What do you mean by that now? Absorption is absorbed into the circulation, how it is getting absorbed into your bloodstream. Distribution, how it is distributed to various tissues of the organs. Then third is metabolized. So basically how it is getting metabolized or how it is getting break down in your body. Fourth one is the excretion, how it is going to be eliminated or excreted in urine or feces. So this is the fourth thing which actually constitute the pharmacokinetics, that is absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion. So if you are taking a medicine, how it is going to move, how it is going to modify it and excrete it from your body is known as pharmacokinetics. I hope it is clear to everyone what is meant by pharmacokinetics. If anyone has any doubt regarding any of the questions which we have covered till now, please ask me. Okay, if not, then I'm moving forward. So the next question is, what does the term biological half-life mean? Biological half-life. So options are, it is the time required to reduce half of the radioactivity level inside the body. It is the time required for the concentration of a drug to reduce by 50% during the terminal phase. It is the time required by a drug to exactly reduce its original concentration to half as a result of biological elimination, or it is the time required by a drug in a plasma to reduce to its half concentration due to biological elimination. So, what do you think will be the meaning of biological half life? Any idea? The correct answer it is the time required by a drug to exactly reduce its original concentration to half as a result of biological elimination. So, what happened? So, here, if you are taking a drug, right? So, there is a biological elimination. What do you mean by that? Basically, excretion from your body. So, it is a time, this biological half life is a time which actually required by a drug to reduce its amount to half of the original amount which you have taken as a result of biological elimination, that is biological excretion. So if you have taken a drug in 20 mg, so it is a time which actually required by a drug to reduce its amount to 10 mg, that is the half of the original concentration you have taken through the biological elimination. So with each half-life proportionally less of the drug is eliminated. So this is the formula for this half-life of the biological half-life of drug. So it is a time for a drug to reduce by 50%. So it is 0.69 into Vd, that is volume of distribution. Cl is the clearance, right? For example, if you have taken this half life is going to be happening in 8.63 hours, then your volume of distribution is 50 liter and clearance for 4 liter per hour. Clearance excretion from your body. Okay. So time required to reach half of the original concentration remains constant. Okay, so here if you are taking this uh, one of the drug molecule and the concentration is going 100%, then how much time it is required for a drug to reduce its amount to 50%, basically half of the concentration as a result of biological elimination is known as half-life of the drug. That is the biological half-life of the drug molecule. It is a time for the drug to reduce by 60% of, 50% of its original concentration. So I hope it is clear to all of you what did this biological half-life mean. Now coming to the next question. So following are the phase 1 reaction except oxidative reactions, hydrolytic reactions, reductive reactions, sulfide reactions. So what do you mean by phase 1 reactions and which one of the following are not is not a phase 1 reaction? So phase 1 and phase 2 reaction, which we have already discussed in the previous tutorial. So I'm taking that question from there. So in which of the reaction it is not constituting your phase 1 reaction? Is it the oxidative reaction, hydrolytic reaction, reductive reaction, or sulfide reaction? Anyone knows the answer? Okay, so again, I am just brushing your concept. So here, metabolism is happening in two main phases. Phase 1 metabolism is generally involves the introduction of polar fractions, that is hydroxyl group, amine group. It generally involves an increase in water solubility. So basically, the first thing is solubility, increasing the solubility of your drug, and which actually involves the introduction of polar groups. And the reaction which are involved is oxidation, reduction, and hydrolysis. Right now, the coming to the phase two thing. So this phase two actually deals with conjugation of pre-existing functionality, conjugate drugs with certain attachment or groups. It further enhances the water solubility, and the conjugation with sulfate, glucuronic acid, amino acid, glutathionase, acid methyl transferase. These things, these reactions come into the post phase two metabolism. So in phase one metabolism, you are only introducing the polar groups onto the drug molecule just to increase its water solubility. And the main reaction which involves are oxidation, reduction, and hydrolysis. But when you are coming to the phase two, you are introducing the conjugation basically. Conjugation, conjugation of pre-existing functionality. Conjugate drugs with certain attachments or groups. So basically, you are introducing conjugation which further enhances your water solubility. But the reaction which involves are conjugations with sulfate, glucuronic acids, amino acids, glutathiones, and acyl methyl groups. So these are the two main phases of metabolism, and this is what the reaction involves and how they are involving the introduction of polar groups or involving the conjugation introduction. So this is known as phase one and phase two metabolism. So here, if you have taken a drug, the drug metabolism, how it is going to be metabolized. So sometimes drug goes through phase one, phase two before phase one. Example, isoniazid. So what happens? This drug goes to phase one, oxidation, reduction, hydrolysis happen. It get eliminated, and then it some of them is getting eliminated, and the remaining drug is now transferred to phase two, where you have introduced the conjugation, and then you have excreted it from your body. And sometimes some of the drugs directly enter in your phase two instead of the phase one. Okay, so this is how drug metabolism work, and in two phases, phase one and phase two. So in phase one, you are introducing the polar groups, and in phase two, you are introducing the conjugation. So in either way, you are just increasing the water solubility of your drug, but the reactions which are actually involving is different in phase one and phase two. Okay. So now if I come to the question, so what do you think will be the right answer now? It is evident now which one is the not the reaction which involves the phase one. So the reaction is sulfide reactions. So these three reaction, oxidative, hydrolytic, or reductive, these three reaction involved in phase one. But sulfide reactions are not included in phase one reaction. It is in phase two. So the right answer is sulfide reactions. Coming to the next question, which factor does not significantly influence drug absorption? Blood flow at absorption site, drug solubility, drug color, surface area of absorbing membrane. Again, this question is very simple. So they are asking which factor does not influence your drug absorption. Is it the blood flow at absorption site, drug solubility, drug color, or surface area of absorbing membrane? Any answers? So basically, it involves the drug color, See, your drug absorption depends on physiochemical properties, that is actually solubility, lipophilicity, and physiological factors like blood flow and surface area. Drug color has no role in absorption because drug color, which color is the drug, is independent of its absorption technique, right? So how much it is going to be absorbed in your body doesn't depend on the drug color. It actually depends on the lipophilicity, solubility, blood flow, and surface area of where your blood has to be absorbed, right? The right answer is drug color. It is independent of this absorption technique. Coming to the next question, a prodrug is a prodrug is designed mainly to decrease drug solubility, improve absorption of pharmacokinetic properties, increase toxicity, or prevent metabolism. So, what do you think a prodrug is designed for? Decreasing the drug solubility, improve absorption of pharmacokinetic property, increase toxicity, or prevent metabolism. So, what do you think will be the right answer? So it's very evident from the options that improve absorption of pharmacokinetic property. So a prodrug is nothing but an inactive or less active compound that converts into active drug in the body. It is often designed to improve absorption, stability, or bioactivity. So a prodrug is actually a less active compound that converts your active drug into the body, and it is often designed to improve the absorption, stability, and bioactivity. So basically, to improve your uh, activity of the active drug, you have taken this prodrug. I hope it is clear to all of you what is the prodrug and how it is designed mainly for improving the absorption and pharmacokinetic properties, basically stability and bioactivity. So now coming to the next question, which of the following is one of the rules in Lipinski rule of five? Molecular weight equals to 500, no more than 5 hydrogen bond acceptor groups, no more than 10 hydrogen bond acceptors, calculate load p value that is less than plus 5. So first of all, you need to know what is Lipinski rule of 5. So these rules are a list of guidelines proposed by Christopher A. Lipinski to predict if a chemical compound is likely to be orally bioavailable. So if a chemical compound is to be orally bioavailable, what are the rules which govern that? So Lipinski rule states that in general, a orally active drug, basically a drug which you are taking orally, should have no more than 5 hydrogen bond donors. So basically the total number of nitrogen, hydrogen, oxygen, hydrogen bonds should be 5. Not more than that. Not more than 10 hydrogen bond acceptor. So basically the donor should be less than 5 nitrogen, hydrogen, oxygen, and the acceptor molecule should be less than 10. All nitrogen or oxygen atoms should be less than 10. A molecular mass less than 500 daltons, and a calculated octanol water partition coefficient, that is log P, that does not exceed 5. Rotatable bonds should be less than 10. It's important to note that rule of 5 is not absolute, and some successful oral drugs violate one or more of the criteria. So basically, this rules is given by Christopher A. Lipinski in earlier days, and it was governed that if you have to take a medicine orally, it should be following these criteria. Otherwise, you can't take that medicine orally. So the rule was that the hydrogen bond donor should be no more than 5, not more than 10 hydrogen bond acceptor should be there in the structure, a molecular mass should be less than 500 and the partition coefficient should be less than 5. Okay, and it should be the rotatable bond should be less than 10. So these are the criteria of a orally active drug. So it's a very ancient rule. So we can say that some of the molecule doesn't follow that rules. One or two rules are uh, not followed by some of the oral drugs, but we can take it. So this is the ancient rule which is given by Lipinski, that if you have to take a medicine orally, these are the list of four five things which needs to be there to take this medicine orally. Okay. Now coming back to the question, so molecular weight equal to 500, no, because it states that it should be less than 500, right? No more than 5 hydrogen bond acceptor groups. No, it is not there because it is 10, which could be hydrogen bond acceptor, but donor should be 5, right? Not more than 5. This is also not right. A calculated log p value that is less than 5. So the fourth option is the correct one, that is a calculated log p value, that is the partition coefficient, should be less than 5. So this is the Lipinski rule of 5. So these 5 points are governed by Christopher Lipinski. So I hope it is clear what is this Lipinski rule of 5. Now coming to the next question, which of the following routes of administration do not bypass the first pass metabolism? Intravenous, nasogastric tube, sublingual, or topical? So which of them do not pass the first pass metabolism? So I have showed that diagram in which some of the things are bypassing the first pass metabolism, which is actually taking place in liver and lungs. So what do you think will be the route which is not bypassing that metabolism? So the right answer is the nasogastric tube. It is not bypassing it. Why? Because this intravenous injection is given into bloodstream directly, so it is bypassing that first pass metabolism and is directly acting on your active site and then excreting from your body. Sublingual is also the if you are taking any medicine under your tongue, it is directly going into your bloodstream through your saliva. Topical is also bypassing your first pass metabolism because you are applying something and it is directly absorbed by the cell membrane, goes directly to your bloodstream, and that is how it is bypassing through liver and lungs. So the first pass effect is effectively happening majorly in the liver. So the drugs which are actually bypassing the liver effect is bypassing your first pass effect. That is the nasogastric tube, that cannot bypass it because you are taking it through the nasal way, and there it is going to your esophagus, and then it is going to your liver, right, lungs, and then it is going to the liver. So in liver there is a first pass effect which is happening. IV is passing it, right, but the gut absorption factors, gastric emptying, GI blood flow interactions, these things are there when you are talking about this gut, and after that it is getting eliminated. So first pass effect is basically happening in liver, and those of the medicines which are actually is not passing through your liver is bypassing your first pass effect. Okay, so intravenous injections are bypassing it, sublingual is bypassing it, topical is bypassing, but not the nasogastric tube. Okay, so now coming to the next question, what is meant by the drug metabolism? So what do you mean by drug metabolism? The therapeutic effect of a drug on an illness, the use of drug not authorized by FDA, the chemical alteration of a drug by the body, the elimination of drug in urine or feces. So, what do you think is the drug metabolism? So the right answer is the chemical alteration of a drug by the body. As the name suggests, drug metabolism. After you are taking the drug, how it is going to be altered in your body, how it is going to be metabolized in your body is known as drug metabolism. So basically the chemical alteration of a drug by your body is drug metabolism. I hope it is clear to all of you. Coming to the next question. Which of the following explains why newborns and older people often need smaller doses of drugs than older children or younger adults? They have decreased activity of their metabolic enzymes. They have increased activity of their metabolic enzymes. Their body produces the wrong enzyme. Both age groups have increased sensitivity to drug. So, which of the following do you think is the uh, reason why newborns and the older people are medicated to take smaller doses of drugs than any other older children or the younger adult? What do you think will be the right answer? So the right answer is they have decreased activity of their metabolic enzyme because in infants the system is not well developed. It is developing. That is why it is recommended by the doctors that you take only small doses of medicine. And in old people also, your metabolic system is not that much of capable, and it is actually degrading day by day. That is why they are prescribed to have small doses of drugs. And the right answer is that they have decreased activity of their metabolic enzyme because the metabolic enzymes are not working properly in both the cases. Newborns, it is not developed, and in older people, it is actually getting degraded there with time. Okay, so I hope it's clear. Next question is: in the intra-articular route of drug administration, injection is given into arteries, arteria, joints, areolar tissue. What do you think will be the route of drug administration injection in the intra-articular drug injection? Where it is given intra-articular drug. So the right answer is joints. In an intra-articular injection or joint injection involves directly injecting medication into space between the bones with the joint to treat pain and inflammation, commonly used for conditions like osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis. So basically, it is an injection which is given in the joints. So it is directly injecting the medication into the bones, into the space between the bones. So if your bones, two bones have spaces, so at that space, at that joint or bone, that injection is given to treat the pain and inflammation. Right? So this is known as the joint injection as well. It is given in joints. I hope it is clear to all of you. So this thing, so I think we should stop here. So we will be discussing the left out questions in the next slide. I mean next tutorial, which is tomorrow because I have skipped one of the class in the last week, so I'm taking an extra class today. So we will be meeting tomorrow again with week 8 tutorial, and I hope all of you have understood the concept which we have taken till far. So thank you so much for joining, and we will be meeting tomorrow as well at the same time, I think 5 to 7. And please make sure that you join on time, and it will be beneficial for you guys to understand what I'm talking from the starting because what happens is I actually talk about the concept initially in the starting slides, and if you're joining in between, you actually miss those, and you don't know what I'm talking and you don't understand what I'm talking. Okay. So it's better to join early to understand the concepts, and then we'll move forward to the questions that you can also enjoy because you can answer those questions easily based on the concept which I have taken in the initial slides. Okay, so thank you so much for joining, and I'm ending this session for today, and we'll meet you tomorrow at the same time, 5 to 7. So thank you so much for joining.